Balam Ambul, Nanawal, Yindamara, Nyaju, Yerabang, Marang. I've just said in the language of my people, the Wiradjuri, I pay my deep respect to the Ngunnawal people on whose land I am coming to you from today, in what is a very cloudy and wet Canberra afternoon. I want to pay homage and honour and pay my respect as well to the many lands on where you're sitting, watching or participating in this webinar today. I know you're from all over the country and therefore pay my respects to the lands that you're from. Can I thank Pat Dudgeon, someone I've known for a very long time, for the invitation to speak today in the webinar. And I also say hello to Tom Calmer, whom I've also known for a very long time, and Jennifer McGrath, whom I know is participating in this webinar. Please forgive my nasally voice. I'm getting over a really nasty flu, and it is now a very nasty cold, so I'm not sounding my best today. So please forgive me. Hello to all the state and territory representatives, the many experts that are there today, and any ministers or ministerial staff that are also participating. You know, suicide, as we all know, has a deep and profound impact on our families and the wider community. Every death by suicide is a heartbreaking loss. For those joining us today who have experienced a suicide close to you, can I also offer you my deep regard and condolences. I hope that by talking about suicide, sharing experiences, being open to our feelings, and sharing resources such as the manual, we can break down stigma and collectively support each other in this very, very tough topic. We can reach out to someone in distress, offer them the helping hand they need, and start the journey of healing. We know how deeply this runs in our communities. I lost my own son 3 years ago to suicide. He was in his 30s and a very beautiful young man who found this earth a very difficult and cruel place. Every death by suicide reminds us of the work ahead to ensure our people are heard, supported, and have access to the services they need. An Albanese Labor government will never waver in our determination to reduce suicide rates amongst First Nations people. We've all been to communities who have just buried someone or are going to bury someone that week or the week after, young people mostly, because of suicide. As a minister, I will never waver in my determination to reduce suicide rates amongst First Nations people. As a citizen of this country, as a mother, as a human being, I will never waver in my determination to reduce suicide rates amongst First Nations people in this country. Too many of our people are at risk. Too many are among the most disadvantaged Australians. Too many experience poverty, trauma, marginalisation, and discrimination. In truth, we all know that we must make progress in all of these fronts. If we want to see the future First Nations people deserve, whether through our professional roles as members of our communities or in our personal relationships with family and friends. Many of us will be presented with the opportunity to help someone in distress. We won't always know what to do We won't always be ready. But we do know that you've got to be there for the long haul. And we do know that provision of services is absolutely fundamental. It can be paralysing when you're confronted with needing to swing in and help, but don't know how to do it or what to say, especially when you're desperate not to make a bad situation worse. This is why it is so valuable to have a central repository of First Nations-led, evidence-based information in the Manual of Resources, targeted to both the needs of First Nations people as well as the communities. It is also an excellent resource for policymakers and health services. And I understand many of you are on the webinar today are from that sector. As we heard from Professor Dudgeon, the First Nations suicide rate is unacceptably high and tragically has continued to rise in recent years. It's double for adults and 4 times as high for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander children when compared with other Australians. This gap is not new. This gap hurts me every time I see it. It hurts all of us. It generates the raw shock and distress that it has every time I have considered it over the course of my life. These statistics hurt because they represent people in pain, people we know, families who need to put the pieces of their lives back together. My thoughts are always with the mothers and fathers, grandmothers and grandfathers, brothers and sisters, children, aunties and uncles, friends and acquaintances who are left with the burden of asking, is there anything more I could have done? Sorry business comes all too frequently to our people. As you know, earlier this year, all Australian governments signed the National Mental Health and Suicide Prevention Agreement. It commits to outcomes for First Nations people as a priority and reaffirms all Australian governments' commitment to a national agreement on closing the gap. The Labor government will build on this commitment to First Nations mental health and suicide prevention by taking a holistic approach that centres the role of social and emotional well-being in supporting the health of First Nations communities. A social and emotional well-being approach gives us the tools for suicide prevention through self-determination. Respect for First Nations knowledge systems, restoration of culture, and First Nations leadership of programs and services. The Labor government will support First Nations self-determination, truth-telling and reconciliation by implementing the Uluru Statement from the Heart in full. This includes establishing a Makarrata Commission to oversee a national process of truth-telling and treaty-making, and that will make a difference. It's also committed to holding a referendum to enshrine a First Nations voice in the Australian Constitution. These are big changes that will transform how governments hear and support the needs of First Nations communities. As we move toward these new ways of working together, the Labor government will work with communities to deliver programs that take a holistic approach to well-being and address social and cultural determinants of health. We will also continue to partner at the national and local levels with First Nations leaders in social and emotional well-being, mental health and suicide prevention. Thank you again for the opportunity to speak to today. My breath's running out. Thank you again for the opportunity to speak to you at today's event. And thank you, Professor Dudgeon, and your team, and all involved in the development and continual practical iteration of this valuable resource. Thank you so much.